And welcome, as always, to mytenniscoaching.com and My Tennis Coaching on YouTube. Today, I've got a very special video for you. It's a coaching conversation with Matt Wiggin from Peak Performer in Australia. Me and Matt have an amazing conversation. We touch upon ecological dynamics, constraint-led coaching. It's quite a long chat. It's definitely non-linear. We tend to go off, or I tend to go off in lots of different tangents as well. But it's an amazing listen, whether you're an experienced tennis coach or you're a brand new tennis coach. Please check it out. I will leave timestamps down below, so you may want to jump around to maybe some areas that you find interesting. But it was an amazing chat. Huge thanks to Matt, and I hope you enjoy it. As always, please like and subscribe to the channel and leave any questions down below for myself or Matt, and I'm sure we'll get back to you. Enjoy. And welcome, as always, to mytenniscoaching.com. And for once, I'm not talking on my own. I have a very special guest from the opposite side of the world, from Western Australia. Matt, how's it going?
Great, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having us on the chat here.
No, we were just saying off camera that you're always sending me voice notes. So rather than having a voice note, it would be quite nice to actually get on camera and share some coaching messages. So me and Matt, we've been talking for a long time now on sort of social media and WhatsApp and stuff about all dynamics and sharing best practice and sharing some maybe questionable practice at times as well that we see online. But just tell everyone sort of who you are and a little bit about your journey, especially in and around constraint-led coaching and ecological dynamics.
Yeah, so my name's Matt Wiggin, and I'm from the UK. Clearly, played tennis in Cumbria in the Lake District when I was a junior, and then I was a little bit in other places. Like I was in London for a few years, and then in the northeast in Sunderland, and went through my levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the UK. Moved to Australia. And did my level 5 here, which is called the Master Club Pro. And I do coach education as well, so delivering like the coaching qualifications, our equivalent of level 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So yeah, do that and think it's really interesting work. I guess the thing I'm interested in is what makes an effective tennis coach? How do we be the most effective we can be for the person that we're helping to play tennis? And I think therefore to do that, we need to not just do what we've always done, or not just do what we see around us, but to have a bit of an obligation to find out what is contemporary practice doing, what does the research say, how do we make sense of the research and bring it over into the practical, which is, I work at the coalface. I'm on a tennis court at a club for 6 days a week. So I feel like it's important to be a good role model around those things and have some sort of overarching approach to how I help people, or try and help people play tennis more effectively.
I love it. And we're just saying that you still have that sort of English accent as well, mate. You haven't quite got the Australian twang just yet, which is great. And I'm just thinking that I'm kind of jealous a little bit as well, because I think you're almost living my life, because my dream as a young coach was always to go to Australia and live there and coach there. What made you make that big jump, literally the big jump from the UK to Australia?
There was two factors really. So one was I was working at Sunderland Tennis Centre, which is an absolutely brilliant place. Loved it. The guy that I was working with, Graham, shout out to him, Graham Fowler, absolute hero, amazing coach. There's someone who's a high performing coach, if ever there was one. Like, he is doing God's work. He is amazing. Like, the effort he puts in is unreal. Learned so much from being around him for 5 years there. But like a lot of these indoor centres in the UK that were previously run by local authorities and councils, it got taken over by a leisure operator. And we'd be going to all these, I remember each year we'd sort of go to these conferences, and the first year there was 1 or 2 had been taken over. And then the second year there was, 10 had been taken over. And then the third year there was like half the room had been taken over. And each year with the takeover, oh yeah, we've got fewer tennis courts, but we have got a trampoline park. We've got fewer tennis courts, but we have got a yoga and Zumba studio or whatever. And I thought, yeah, I don't think they've probably with the best will in the world got tennis at heart here. So my mission is to be the most effective coach I can be. So I'm not really going to be able to achieve that if I'm getting pushed out by the trampoline park, you know. So so it was partly that, and just um, to be, yeah, it was that plus. I want to keep it politics free, but a little bit of Brexit. I did my own personal Brexit. I Brexited England.
Yeah, I love it. Um, the good news is the trampoline parks aren't quite as popular. Unfortunately, pickleball and paddle have sort of taken over that route as well, and it's a huge issue here in the UK. And again, I'm not going to get too much into the politics myself, but it's got worse since you've left. I said most indoor centres now, apart from one or two, are generally ran not even by local authorities; they're run by commercial businesses, and it's a worry for tennis in this country because we're losing more courts. We're losing courts to pickleball, paddle, trampoline parks. I said it's very rare now that you find a tennis centre that's not run by a commercial business, and it's yeah, that's a topic to discuss maybe on a different day. I'm just interested of what point then did you come across CLA and ecological dynamics? Because I've only been in this, well, down this rabbit hole, and I call it a rabbit hole because it is. Once you start down it, there's no end. When did you sort of come across sort of a different sort of way of coaching?
Probably maybe 4 years ago. It was
Okay.
during the pandemic. I can remember that because I can sort of remember where I was when I was doing these deep dives into it. Yeah, I mean, I'm always sort of reading and researching and trying to find out like, oh, what about this? What about that? What are other people doing? Yeah, what does the research say? And I guess I just went down a rabbit hole that led me towards that, and I thought it had a lot of merit to it. You know, it's there's many ways to skin a cat, clearly, because
Mm-hmm.
if it was the only way, end of discussion, closed book, then people, well, of course, there are different cultures that do different things. So you hear these stories about, well, at the Spartak club in Russia, they don't hit a ball, they shadow swing for 3 years before whatever, and they have people playing in the highest level of the game. If you go to maybe America or Spain, they do it differently. If you go to Australia, maybe it's different here and whatever. So clearly, there are
Yeah.
good tennis players from all of those places. So um, the that to me suggests that there's many ways to skin a cat. But personally, I just found that the maybe the traditional way of doing it, if we can call it that, it just didn't really click for me. It wasn't. I was not really seeing the effect that I thought it maybe should have, given what given how prevalent it is, how pervasive it is. I was like, it's just not really. I feel like it's a long struggle to get people to be playing quickly, and I'm I'm not working with world class players or anything. I work at a tennis club and I work with a range of people from red, orange, green, once a week, twice a week, adults, people playing league and club matches, people doing tennis express, beginners, what intermediates, whatever. So um, it's not something I felt like I don't want an approach that where I have to say, welcome to the tennis club. You can't play tennis yet. Maybe in a year and a half's time, you'll be able to join in at the social tennis, but you will need to do three private lessons a week at X number of pounds or dollars an hour and blah blah blah. Nah, I want something that's like, great. Let's serve, rally, score. Let's get you going, and let's get you into some sort of appropriate level competition as quick as you can, if that's your goal.
No, that's great. And again, very similar to me. I said I went down this rabbit hole in lockdown. And I think lockdown gave everyone a chance to reset and regroup and really think about life and sort of, well, but we definitely had enough time to think about life. And I sat down and thought, like, well, I've worked with so many players over the years, and only a small percentage actually achieved sort of what I would class as a good standard. And I'm like, well, there must be more to it. And at the time, I was so stressed with coaching because coaching was a slog, like you mentioned there. It was hard work, and I'd come home every day like just absolutely just tired. So I thought there must be something else. And I thought, you know what? Maybe it's the psychology. Maybe it's like it's a mental block with the players because I train you. I've told the story a million times, so sorry for repeating myself, but I train you on the forehand. I'd get the forehand perfect, goes into a match, it disappears. And I'd blame you. Yeah, it's your fault. You're the player. What you're doing. Told you a million times. And then I sat down at lockdown. Thought maybe it's psychology with the player. And I signed up for the psychology online course, and the word ecological dynamics and ecological psychology got mentioned. And I thought, oh, what's that? And I looked into it. It was like learn via play. And then I thought about how I learned how to play tennis and football. And it then resonated with me a bit like what you're saying. Like, why do we say to players, "Oh, you can't play for another year and a half"? And I had a great conversation with a player, and they're not competing. And I said, "Well, I can't pick you for the team because you're not competing." Oh yeah, but our coach said we're not ready yet to compete, and we need 6-7 hours a week coaching. I'm like, we're never going to be ready. And I think the great point you made there, we need to get them playing as quick as possible. And I think that's where like pickleball and paddle or padel, however you want to pronounce it. I don't know how you pronounce it in Australia. I call it paddle. They're really popular because people just pick it up and play straight away.
Mm-hmm.
And people are saying, yeah, but you can't do that with tennis because it's so technical. I'm like, no, it's not. It's a racket and ball or bat and ball game. Like there must be a better way. And that's what I sort of fell down the rabbit hole as well. So over the past 4 years, what impact has the CLA or ecological dynamics had on your players first and foremost?
Well, I think it, part of it has been being more person centered. You know, that's part of it. I don't know. Of course, you can be person centered and also not have a ecological dynamics approach. You know, theoretically, you could just choose to have I have my approach, and I am also person centered, and that's fine. But yeah, it's a much more I'm much more comprehensive with what I do, I suppose. And I really think that it's interesting what you're saying there, Steve, about when the player maybe it drops away in a match. So whatever you've been training, it drops away in a match. And I really resonated with I think it was Louis Kaye who was saying it one time at some conference or whatever. But you know, he said like it's not enough to just be there to help them out with their tactics and their technique, because it might be that when they're going, you know, into that performance environment, i.e., they're there to perform, whether that's county under 14 player or whether that's a beginner club tournament or whatever, but they will still feel maybe nervousness or anxiety about what could happen or frustration about missing that missing that serve at 30, 40 down, whatever it is. And so it's not that they've forgotten their technique. They're not holding the racket upside down all of a sudden. You know, they still know how to, do whatever. It's more that they're, mentally the performer has gone somewhere else. You know, maybe they're focusing too much on the outcome, or maybe they're too tense or whatever it is. So I really felt like we need to be able to intervene at any level. So whether that's like mental, physical, tactical, or technical, and so doing that, taking that sort of overview of it really gave it more like, okay, this is more like a person-centered or holistic approach, I suppose you might call it. And then obviously this ecological dynamics constraints approach covers off that quite well. It is a more holistic way of looking at it and understanding it. Maybe the player doesn't need to understand all that stuff, but from the coaching lens, it's much more helpful than just like, oh, well, your forehand broke down, so let's get the basket out and let's hit 100 forehands.
Yeah. It's a great way of putting it, and much better than the way I put mine. I think you're right, and I think that's what I struggled with, and we'll call it traditional coaching. And I coached that way for 19 years, and whenever something went wrong, it was either tactical or technical. I never thought about the person. I never thought about the person holding the racket, how they feel. And I now know after 4 years that emotion plays such a huge part in decision making, problem solving. And something I was reading the other week about perception, when you get nervous, your perception narrows. So you see less information because you go into almost a stage of defense. So your perception narrows, therefore you see less affordances or options. And I never understood that as a coach. And part of it because I was never trained that way. Obviously, we went through coach qualifications and we never looked at the person holding the racket. It was always about the outcome, either technically or tactically. And I think that's what really resonated with me when I started going looking at the ecological psychology. It was, oh yeah, it's like there's a human being here. There's a human, and that human changes in behavior. They change in emotional state with children every couple of minutes. And like, I need to understand more about, and you mentioned the word player centered. I need to know more about the person and less about, okay, almost trying to program them like a robot. Well, if this happens, you do X, Y, and Z. And if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then that's your fault. It goes back to what I said before, like, oh, it's your fault because it keeps breaking down. And that's what I find so fascinating about this methodology or psychology is like every player is completely different. And I've been that coach where I'll deliver 8 private lessons back to back and it'll all be the same lesson because I'll be working on short ball line, come in and volley. And it's like, it goes back to something I put on Instagram today. Like, we almost try and manufacture players, and human beings are so unique. And again, there's a great podcast I listened to yesterday from Emergence, and they were saying like it's an organism in an ecosystem, like an athlete. And if you don't take consideration the organism and the life form, then it's really hard to coach it. And I think, yeah, people do say I'm player centered. And I see that a lot here in the UK of like, oh, I'm definitely player centered. And then you watch them and the coach will make all the decisions. The coach knows all the answers. The coach provides all the solutions. But they may ask as a player on, do you want to go cross or line once or twice in a lesson? Um, and it's, yeah, I just find it fascinating, the whole player centered thing, because it's just so much to it. And I think as coaches, again, I don't think I was exposed to it enough in my formative years. And I get it because, again, you've done all the research and stuff as well. It is complicated at times when you're reading the research papers, and I'm like, what? I don't quite understand that part. Or if you listen to Rob Gray and stuff like that, it's like, oh, okay, that's quite heavy. Um, yeah, so played centered. It's challenging though at times. I think as a practitioner, as a coach, to look through the eyes of the player and have empathy. And that's a great quote I've heard recently. Like, we need to see the world through the eyes of the player, not through the lens of a coach.
100%. I mean, think how little we probably have to think to maintain a rally with a beginner or intermediate player, right? Like, we can do
Yeah,
that having a conversation, looking down their end, seeing what's going on. Like, we can multitask, I would say, probably very, very proficiently, you know. So their experience is so different to our experience. They're probably highly aware of what's happening, but only in maybe a small range of attention or something. And they might be even terrified at the
yeah,
ball, you know, whereas we can be so
yeah,
relaxed probably, you know, and it is hard to then to be cognizant of that and to be mindful that, yeah, even though we are sharing the same rally, our experience is, you know, potentially quite radically different.
yeah. And I think part of that is we don't understand the difference in behavior, because obviously we have confidence in that stage because we're the expert, right? We're the coach, we know everything. Yeah, we're so relaxed that we're talking to the parents and we're talking to the other coaches as we have a rally. So our emotional state is one of such confidence and relaxation. And the other player on the other side, nervous as hell because it's the first lesson. They're feeling judged because they're on court with you. They're feeling judged by the parent who you're having a chat with. They're also then comparing themselves to the player on the court next to them. So their emotional state is like all over the place. And we think it's really easy because we're from a different perspective. And that's something that I've tried to do more especially over the last 12 months, is just, okay, put yourself in the shoes of the player. And the only way I can do that is by talking to the player and saying, okay, what do you see? What do you feel? What decisions did you have? Why did you make that decision? And I don't know about yourself, but I found that much more impactful with the player because one, they feel like I'm taking interest in them and I really care. But two, for the coach's point of view, I'm getting so much more information that I never even thought about before.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there was a player I was working with the other week, and she was really good at one end, but when we changed ends in a lesson, she wasn't that good. And I said, "So what's going on? Like, is there, like on that side of the court, what do you see, Dad? Okay, how's that make you feel? Nervous. Why does it make you feel nervous? Oh, because if I get it wrong, he's probably going to tell me off in the car on the way home." And like, obviously a standard lesson to be honest, but without having that conversation with the player, I would probably just have a go at it for not
Yeah.
concentrating,
Why do you keep
not
missing
being
the
focused.
forehand? Why do you keep missing it?
Yeah, well, I'd keep doing that. And like old me would have just absolutely hammered her for lack of concentration.
Mm-hmm.
But now I look at it, okay, well, there's something else going on here. And then just having that conversation with the player. And it was interesting because I was talking to quite an experienced coach a few weeks ago about player-centered coaching and within coach education. And they were saying, yeah, we can't really do it in coach ed because it takes too long. So what do you mean it takes too long? Yeah, coaches stand around asking players loads and loads of questions. Like, let's just get to the point and just tell them. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't really work that way. Like,
I totally agree. Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah.
yeah,
I suppose one thing that I found quite impactful, and this is something that I remember Dan Kiernan telling me about. So shout out to Dan, who's a brilliant coach and a wonderful person. But I remember chatting to him, and he was like saying, "It's." I'm paraphrasing now. I'm not quoting him directly, but it's something like, "It's very hard to develop people, to help develop people, if you haven't connected with them in the first place."
yeah,
And so if you skip that, which we often do, there's often a pressure to do that. So, if we're talking about the
yeah,
environment that we're all in, maybe that first session with a new player and the parent is at the sideline, what's the environment? The dynamic is they want to see some action and they want to see some quick wins, probably, right? Like what they don't want to
yeah,
see is a therapy and a counseling session at the side, you know.
yeah,
And yet, so we have, as the coach, probably environmentally, we feel a pressure to rush into the developing stage. Like we've got to start developing people, but actually, we haven't we haven't connected to the person. We haven't connected to
mm-hmm.
anything really about them, to their journey, their purpose. Then how on earth do we have any sort of order or understanding of like what will be useful for you, what's going to help you the most, what will be the quickest win or the lowest hanging fruit that we can help with. We skip that and it's just straight into like develop, and then what you're developing based off probably a model, probably looking and going,
Yeah,
oh, I think your elbow needs to be, or you could, whatever it is. And it's then that you're treating them like mechanical, robotic. So to skip that connection part at the start is a massive error in my view. It's a massive
yeah,
error, and but you're right. It's not something that's maybe tackled as much as it possibly, or spoken about as much as it could be, given how important. Well, I found it really important, but given how important I think it is
yeah.
broadly.
It's such a great point, and I think as coaches, we're under a bit of peer pressure from the parent because they're paying us quite a lot of money, so they want to see instant success straight away. Peer pressure possibly from the club, from head coaches. So we almost just want those, and you say it there, the quick win straight away. So a classic lesson of mine used to be first lesson. It's got to be a forehand, doesn't it? Forehand short ball, build your confidence up, yeah, and then all model based stuff and get those quick wins. And the issue is, like you mentioned there, because I don't know what you want from it. I don't know what you need. I don't know how you feel. And I think the first session I do now is like the first 15, 20 minutes, I always do like a pre-session with the player and the parent. Okay, what do you want from the session? Okay, if that's what you want, this is what we need. And okay, what does that look, feel, and sound like? And I do it now at the start of every session. My players got like a little whiteboard. Okay, what do you want to achieve today? What do you need to be able to do? And what does that look, feel, and sound like? And that's our little framework that we're going to work off. And it's given the player the autonomy to make those decisions. Whereas years ago, okay, beforehand, short ball forehand straight away, I'll make the decision because I want the quick win.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a bit more challenging, and it does take time. And I don't know about yourself, but when I first started doing constraint-led coaching, ecological dynamics, it was hard to find the right questions. It was hard because sometimes you ask a question and you just get like the classic stock answers. Like the amount of times I'd ask a question, the player go, split step. What do you mean split step? We're not even talking about footwork or low to high. So they'll just give me stock answers. And I think part of that goes back to like what you mentioned about the connection. The players are almost scared to give opinions because they just want to please you as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that connection, like you mentioned, Dan's an amazing person with the connection. Like if you ever speak or listen to Dan, like he makes a connection with you because he takes an interest in you. And like and you can see why he's such a successful coach, because he has those very close connections with players. And I think it's something that we don't really realize as coaches of how important that connection is. And the only way you get that connection is by listening to the player. And I think a lot of the time as a coach, especially my formative years, I never listened to you as a player because I knew best. I'm the expert. I've got the qualification.
Do you think that's sometimes why? Because similar to what you said there, Steve, about some of those initial conversations can sometimes be tricky to tease out helpful information
Yeah.
from people. One of the things that often is someone might ask for a session or something, and it's like, oh yeah, like how can we help? How can I help you play tennis more effectively? Or I just need to work on technique. And
Yeah.
I sort of wonder, is that because that's the narrative that they've only ever had? Like maybe they haven't really been asked. No one's maybe really prodded them enough times to move beyond that. Oh, I need to work on my technique. Cool, we'll work on your technique. Let's get the basket out. Here we go. Oh, looks so beautiful. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Lovely. Bend your knees, rack it over your shoulder. See you next week. Same again. Like it's a quick and easy answer, but I don't know that we should accept it as quickly as that, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. And I always think of the 5 whys from Toyota. So in Toyota, when things go wrong, they'll ask why 5 times. So why has it gone wrong? Okay, and they'll get an answer. Okay, why? So it's really annoying, but I tend to always lead with that. Okay, so why do you want a lesson? Fix my forehand. Why do you need to fix your forehand? Oh, because it keeps breaking down. Okay, well, why does it keep breaking down in that situation? And ultimately, you sort of end up getting there. And it does take a long time. And I think sometimes one of the biggest barriers coaches push back at me is time. Oh, but I've only got an hour. Going back to the conversation with the experienced coach the other week, I've only got a short amount of time with a player. I'm like, no, you haven't. Like, if you're any good at your job, you could have 2, 3, 4 years with this player. And I look back now with my career as a coach, and my most successful players, which I mentioned at the start of the call, they only got so successful because I had the connection with them. Like I had a really deep understanding of them as a person. The other 90%, I didn't have that deeper connection with. And I think as coaches, it's difficult to build those relationships up because of the peer pressure, the transaction of okay, I'm paying you, so I want instant results. And I think that's a big problem of our culture. Everyone wants Amazon Prime. Like Amazon Prime, I want it tomorrow. I don't want to wait 3 days. So a parent doesn't want to wait 3 weeks to see an improvement on the forehand. They want it in the session. And we know from a basket feeding and close practice, I can get that success quite quick by basket feeding and isolating it. And then, as you said there, everyone's happy. We exchange money at the end of the session. But then we come back the week after and do the same thing again. And I think part of the problem why we have a little bit of resistance, I think, with CLA and ecological dynamics is it does take time. And like I think back now to a couple of players I've been working with for the past 18 months, and it's a slow slog at times, and you don't see any progress. But then all of a sudden, like you'll see them play a tournament and you'll see something you've been working on, and you go, okay, the past 6 months have been worth it for that one moment. And it's like the classic light bulb moment in the player's head as well. And they go, okay, I see that now. And you see it emerge within the game. But I definitely think there's a time pressure, there's a monetary pressure as well. And I don't know about you, but I'm quite comfortable with that these days. Like, I'm not bothered if it takes time. I'm not bothered if it's like it's a long drawn out process. I've done loads of posts on like learning's not linear, and like if you don't improve your forehand in a lesson, I used to get really stressed years ago, but now I'm like fine. Like it might not happen today,
Yeah.
but that's okay.
It's messy, isn't it? Learning is messy. It's like you wouldn't
Yeah,
expect a child who's learning how to write to, to have neat, cursive, joined up handwriting straight away. It's gonna be quite scratchy and jaggedy at first, and maybe it gets a little bit better over time, and then a little bit more, and they refine their skill, and but and eventually they get it. But also, we all have different handwriting, right? Like my handwriting is not the same as yours, and it's like maybe a similar thing to when people will quickly get stuck or tunnel visioned on modeling strokes,
yeah,
but everyone's strokes look quite different, and it's not a hard argument to make, I don't think, because if you just look at, I don't know, like Alcaraz, Rafa, and Federer, okay, for example, whoever, name any top players, Serena, whoever, just name, they've all got big forehands or really effective forehands, weapons, but they
yeah,
all look quite different. So like, which one of them, if you take that sort of model approach, like very prescriptive, like you must do this, this, and this, well, who's got the right forehand? And are you going to tell the other three that they're doing it wrong? Because I don't think they're going to listen, are
yeah.
they?
Yeah. It's I find the model based stuff really interesting, and I was at Wimbledon last year or this year. I took a video of TFO of him serving. I said on my Instagram, like, how many coaches would change his serve technique? And it was like 95% said, yes, we'll change it. Guy's top 10 in the world. Like, why are you even thinking about changing his technique? He's top 10 in the world. Medvedev's a classic one I bring up all the time. World number one. And I think it goes back to it's easy, though. I think it's easy to talk about technique and sound clever, and it's easy to highlight it as the reason why because it's the last thing that we see. So when the player makes contact with the ball and the ball goes out, the last thing we see is the contact. Oh, it must be the technique then. And again, I've definitely been that coach. It's a bit more difficult to understand. Goes back to what we said before. Okay, it's the players that's made the error, and there's a reason for that within the environment, or there's an emotional reason for that as well. And I just think tennis coaches, and I've been that coach, we just feel the pressure of I've got to go to the technique because, and I've had this a lot recently because the coaches around me are talking about technique, and then you've got me who's not talking about technique. So I feel that peer pressure of I should talk about technique because the other coaches are talking about it, and if I go online and look at the tennis god, he's talking about technique, and he's a god of tennis, so he must know what he's talking about. And again, them go into the social media pressure now as well, and every other post, well, every single post on tennis social media, what is it? It's technique, and it's like you've mentioned there. Every top player hits the ball differently. There's no single way, and it goes back to what I said before. The person holding the racket is the most important bit. Like how you hit your forehand, I couldn't care how you hit a forehand now. And I just think that again, we use the word traditional way. We just always resort back to those, and you mentioned it yourself, the low hanging fruit. And it is low hanging fruit for me to say, hit the ball in front. It's a bit more challenging as a coach for me to, okay, have a conversation with you and work out why you're not hitting the ball in front.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. It's I mean, you've got to be like a good detective, haven't you? You know, you've got to.
Oh yeah,
But if you're only used to solving one crime and the crime is technique, you're a bit limited. You know, you sort of need to be able to
yeah,
quickly filter through all sorts of possibilities. Like, oh, they're really anxious, or actually they're not that good at decision making. Like they think they should slap it line when they should just shape it cross court more because it's a better tactical decision. You know, it's actually they're not
yeah,
athletic enough. They're very upright, not a good athletic look, and so they're always stretching and chasing the ball. And actually, if they just increase their athletic look, they'll get there. And maybe
yeah.
it could be any of those things before we get to it's your the action that you send, the action the movement you make to send the ball. Could be so much more things than that, really.
It's so true, and I think looking back, just reflecting now as you're talking about my own coaching journey, I think there was always a pressure of me to have the answer. Okay, because you're paying me, so I need to have answers for you. And then that low hanging fruit, it must be the technique. I actually find it easier to coach now because I just ask you, like, okay, so you went down a line on that last shot. What did you see? What made you go line? What influenced your decision? Oh, my opponent was out of position. Okay, was there any other information you could pick? Yeah, I was up the court. Okay, so what? So how did you decide to hit the ball? Oh, I decided to hit it from high to low. Where did the ball land in the net? Okay, would you do anything differently next time? Yeah, I'd probably go a little bit flatter rather than hit down on the ball. Okay, we'll try that then. Let's go. So I would just get you to give the answers or you work it out. And I find that so much easier to coach now. And I find that I'm less stressed because I don't feel that pressure on my shoulders to give the answers, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think, yeah, anyone who's a tennis coach will have sensed that pressure, probably the need to have the answer. It's like
Yeah.
you've come to me because am I the doctor of the tennis court? Like you go to the doctor when you're ill, to get fixed up. So you come to the tennis coach to get fixed up for your tennis.
Yeah.
So it would be weird if the doctor just goes, I don't know, you know, what do you think? Well, I don't know. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when it comes to the tennis, what a brilliant collaborative approach that is to ask those questions. And we know that when people feel more empowered and that they have more autonomy and ownership over what they're doing, it's likely to lead to higher level of motivation and engagement. So why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you be doing that? We're missing a trick if we're not empowering people in that way and giving some autonomy and ownership to them, because it's actually bizarrely, it might be bizarre or counterintuitive. It's actually probably going to make their journey, yeah, more engaging, more fulfilling for them. What I would say, or what I have a caveat on there, Steve, so I'm interested to get your take on this, is on the nature of feedback, because so working with a couple of players actually recently, and one of them was telling me about some previous coaches, and um, I am quite sort of questioning. I'll ask questions and try and have a conversation, and it's a bit more collaborative. And actually, she was like, "Just tell me the answer. I just want the answer, And I'm like, "All right, okay."
Yeah.
And on the one hand, I'm thinking, I'm glad you've told me that, because that gives me a good sense of what you as a person feel like you need. But I think there's still a tension there, because I'm like, I don't know. It's like if we were doing a crossword puzzle and I just gave you all the answers, have you got any
Mm-hmm.
better at doing crossword puzzles? I don't know. I don't think you have. Have you got any thoughts around that? Around feedback and how that works
Yeah.
for people who want that more direct feedback approach?
I've had it with players. So I had a similar situation with a player just turned around and said, just tell me. Like, just tell me. I need to know. I've had it with parents going, just tell them, I'm paying you to coach my son or daughter. Just tell them what to do. And I always go back to a bit like your analogy of a crossword puzzle. Like I say, well, it's like an exam, isn't it? Like a tennis match. So I could give you the answers, but you won't know how to use those answers within context. Plus, I might not even have the right answer. Like I might tell you something that's completely good for me, but it's not good for you. And part of the skill of being a great player is decision making and problem solving. So I'll help you find better decisions. And all you've got to do is commit to that decision. And it might be wrong, it might be right, but you've got to work that out yourself. And part of my job is not just to stand there and just ask loads of questions and what do you think? And how's it feel about that? My job is to guide you towards better decisions. So let's say, for example, you're 6 feet behind the baseline, really heavy topspin ball to your forehand, and you've decided to attack down the line. Okay. And you've missed 10 out of 10. Okay. Have you seen anything different there? Have you tried anything different? Your job here is to try multiple different things. And then I might put a rule in place to stop you hitting that shot down the line or being so aggressive. So I'll try and manipulate it. And sometimes, again, it depends on the context of the situation as well. Like I'm at County Cup next week. I've got 90 seconds between change of ends. I'm not going to spend that 90 seconds. How do you feel? What do you see? I might say, okay, you're going into the backhand far too much. So I think context is key, but I'm always quite cautious of just giving not the answer, but my opinion. And that's what I say to players now. It's not an answer, it's an opinion. Like, but I might say to you, well, rather than attack down the line, have you tried going deep cross back on that deep ball? Because you keep going line, you keep missing. It's 10 out of 10 you've missed. So if it gets to the point where the player is getting frustrated, I think this is what I call the art of coaching. Because people think with me, especially from the outside, that I just stand back and let you struggle and let you drown. That's no good for you either. And if I see that you're getting frustrated and you're saying to me, just tell me the answer, rather than tell you the answer, I might just give you a couple of options and guide you that way. Mm-hmm. I always try and avoid giving a direct answer because, again, like I said before, I don't think it's the right answer because it's right for me because I see it from my lens and my experience. And I was talking about this with a group of coaches the other day in work, and they were training to hit the ball cross court from a deep position just behind the baseline. But you had to do it. You had to go deep cross on that ball. And I was saying, well, what would Federer do in that situation? And he said, "I'll probably smash it down the line." Okay, well, that's an option for Federer. Obviously, I'm not Federer. But by telling the players they can only hit that shot, you're restricting potential affordance, ability, and option. So a bit like going back to what I say about the player. If I tell the player, you must do this, I might be hindering you. I might be stopping you from finding a really good solution. So that's a long-winded answer to a very good question. But I get it a lot. And I get it from like my head coach will say, oh, too much talking. It's too much talking. Like there's like, just tell them what to do. Yeah, but then if I give you the test results answers, you're not going to be, like you said, the crossword. It's not going to make you better at crosswords. And again, what we said before, learning takes time. It takes a long time. Like, don't be in such a rush for next day delivery with the Amazon Prime. Let's just understand, okay, why you're making the mistake, and let's try and find a better solution. So that's how I tackled that situation. And it happens, mate. It happens week to week with players where they get frustrated with my questions. And then like there's times when I record lots of my lessons and I'll watch back and go, yeah, there's too many questions there. The players sort of getting quite frustrated. Maybe give them a few options. That was definitely a long-winded answer, but hopefully I answered it.
Well, I'm interested then to know a bit more about your reflection process, Steve, because it sounds like you're doing quite a bit of active reflection, to look back on your sessions, you're recording them. That's, even doing that takes additional effort, doesn't it? That's not step onto the court or what we're doing today, forehands, cool, bend your knees over your shoulder. the
Yeah.
very act of setting up the gear to film it with the intent to look back on it afterwards is a good sort of habit to have. So how do you do you have any other tools that you use to reflect upon your coaching practice to look to improve it, or is that the main thing, or you have anything else? Or
There's a couple of things. I started doing it for, first of all, content, obviously, my tennis coaching on all social medias. So that's the first reason. But then when I started watching them back, I was looking less at the drills, because I was filming them for drills for content. And then I wasn't even looking at the player. I was looking at my coaching. I was going, oh, why have I said that? Why have I done that? And then I was thinking, oh, this is actually really useful because I'm more aware and more attuned to my coaching and the effect it has on the player. So I thought, I'm actually going to start recording these more. And that's where sort of the my tennis coaching bit started really to develop. It's like, well, this is all like coaching skills. So I record the vast majority of my private lessons, and I'll watch him back. And it's interesting because there's times where I've done a session, I've recorded it, I've gone home thinking, oh my God, that was such a bad lesson. That was shocking. I'm lying in bed, tossing and turning, like it was so bad. And I got up once at 3 o'clock in the morning. I've got to watch that tape. And I watched it back and I was like, you know what, it was actually a really good lesson. But then I've also driven home thinking, nailed that tonight. Such a good lesson. And I watch it back the next day and it's horrendous. And I quite like doing it. It's hard to do because like it's hard listening to your own voice. Talk about voice notes before. It's hard to do because like you just see a lot of negatives. And that's, I think, the nature of our job. We just see the negatives all the time. But my coaching's changed loads because again, I'm more aware of the words I say carry such a huge weight with the player. Like I could say something to you and either have a positive or negative effect. And that's the pitch, the tone, the type of words that I use. So that's massively changed how I coach. And in terms of different tools, going back to the video, sorry, with the player as well, what I've used a lot with the players is I'll show the player back clips. And years ago, we'd look at technique, right? Oh, you need to bend your knees and or get a bit more lower on that ball. But now I'll pause the clip and say to you, what do you see? And you go to me, what do you mean? What do I see? And you'll go, oh, I'm too high. No, forget about you. What do you see in the environment? I'll see that you're out of position here. The ball's going to land short. I'm out wide. So I'm using it as a tool now as well to build a player's awareness more about what they see. And then I'll say to you, okay, well, what made you hit line then? And do you see any other options available to you now? Oh, you know what? I could have went back in behind you there because I've noticed that you've turned your whole body around. And that's really useful because I'm using it, one, to reflect on my coaching, but to retrospectively for players to look at their decision making as well. And what I found in that case is the player now starts to become more attuned with the environment. Another thing that I've done a lot recently is I've mic'd up the player. So I've got a microphone on and they've got a microphone on. And all I say to them is just talk what's going through your head. And I found that really impactful because I get an insight to what they're feeling, what they're thinking. And I find that's been fascinating as well. And the last thing that I've bought recently that I've not tried out properly yet is I've bought those Meta glasses, a bit like what you've got on now, but it's got cameras in.
yeah,
Because what I'm interested in now is when I talk to you, the reaction I get. So, and then I'll see it through my eyes as well. And like, it is a pain setting it up. It's a pain finding time to watch it back. But I just think as a coach, it's improved my coaching massively. And it goes back to what I said before. Like I'm so much more attuned now of my coaching skills than ever before. And I quite like the lessons where it goes wrong. And I put one up on YouTube this week where I went in with a plan. Okay, we're going to work on changing direction and using height. And we go into the warm up and the player's not changing direction. Me 3 years ago would have said, no, change direction on the short ball. But you see in the video, like, I'm not getting the result. And then I just completely 360 change the lesson around. But I don't tell the player when to change. We just then tailor it to decision making and problem solving. And I think if the camera wasn't running, I probably would have just told her. But I know when I watched that back, I would have been going, oh, why have you told her? Why have you told her? And that little bit of internal pressure of knowing that I'm going to watch that back later on, I think it makes me a better coach.
So if I can put that into an academic language, the camera provides a constraint on the
Yeah,
environment, which
yeah,
affords you the opportunity to do something different. That's
yeah,
really cool. That's a really I've
massively.
not thought of it from that side actually of the benefits of it might stop it might make us think twice about falling into an automatic habit or something like that. But that's such a powerful way
Yeah.
to look at it. Yeah.
It's interesting because obviously, like, I don't have to upload that video. I don't even have to watch it back. But I like the fact that it makes me accountable. So like, I would really watch that. It's like if I would have changed direction. Sorry, if I would have told the player to change direction, I would have watched it back and self critiqued myself. But in the lessons, like, no, this is what I love doing. This is the problem. This is the detective work that you mentioned before, and just having that camera rolling at the back of the court, it just makes me accountable and responsible to make sure that, okay, I don't just go for the quick win to make me feel better. And that's what it is, isn't it? At the end of the day, if the player's struggling, I want me to feel better. Like, I'm tired, of had a bad day, the missus has done my head in, the kids are running around. I just want a stress-free lesson. I don't want to be going around and going this slow learning process. But yeah, having the camera there, it just, yeah, it makes a huge difference, I think.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But I can also see why coaches don't like it as well, because like it does make you accountable. And I think sometimes as a coach, especially, like, I'll watch it back and the stuff on there, I go, oh my god, I can't believe I said that. But if I didn't have the evidence, it's like there's a great thing I was listening to the other day about perspective, and it was about jury duty or something. And like, we see the world differently to how we actually remember it. So going back, like I said before, when I was driving home thinking, oh my god, that lesson was amazing. If I didn't have the video, I would have thought that lesson was amazing. And I would probably do that lesson again and again and again and again. Short ball volley. But now, because I've got the video evidence, like, I watch it back and it was rubbish. It was such a bad lesson. And if I didn't have that video evidence, I would have had the perspective of, I'm so good at what I do. And I think, like, I know here in the UK, we've brought in video assessments quite a lot, and a lot more video within coach education. And the pushback's been quite negative of, oh, it's a pain in the backside to set the camera up and got to buy a tripod, got to buy a microphone. But the benefits, hopefully what I've said over the last 10, 15 minutes, are huge for self-reflection. And coaches don't self-reflect enough, or if they do, it's a warped memory. We either think we're amazing or we're shocking.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is somewhere in the middle. Like, there's good elements to my session, there's bad elements as well. But I highly recommend any coach to film sessions, and I quite like putting them online, not to, again, to show how great I am, but it's that level of accountability. And like, I've got quite a few clips where things go drastically wrong in my lessons. I'm going to share them because, like, if it helps us one coach in the world and go, you know what, that's happened to me. Oh, it's okay then. That's fine. But there's so much ego out there with coaches, and it's like every exercise is so good. It works perfectly. I'm sure you get this within your coach education. Like, you'll show a clip on a course and it looks amazing and it works amazing, and then the coach goes back and tries it in the club and it falls apart. And I think we just need to go back to the reality of the game, as you mentioned before. It's messy, it's chaotic, and that's what my lessons generally look like, and maybe I'm just a bit sad watching them back so much.
Well, there's not many matches that play out with 50 neutral cross-court balls coming from a basket in the middle of the court, is there?
No,
I've not seen many tennis matches
no,
where that happens. So, in a way, it's sort of a bit illusory, isn't it? If people go away from their lesson thinking that's what the match is like. Um, but yeah,
yeah,
like credit to you for being so open with that. It's such a good tool. I mean, in one of the sort of like coaches groups that for the coach education stuff that I do, one of the challenges that I set is to each week submit a video into the group
nice.
showing an application of the principles that we've been working through in the previous session, but in your environment, in your club environment, because ultimately that's where the rubber meets the road, right? Like it's all very nice talking about
Yeah,
like all these principles or whatever it is, but ultimately it's like you're at the coal face or I'm at the coal face, and everyone's at the coal face doing it. So what I'm really interested in is what does it look like for you, and be
yeah.
accountable to that, and put it in the group, and credit to the coaches, they're really good at doing that, and I think it's a bit like it's like drafting. I sort of maybe stick with the same video challenge for a couple of weeks, so they can sort
Yeah,
of. It's like making a draft. Like maybe the first one is not so good, second one a bit better, third one, hey, it's pretty good there. Like I'll put that up on my fridge,
yeah.
So um, I think there's a lot of power to that video. The what video technology adds, but it's not just a side on profile view of the player's forehand technique. It's so much more than that.
Yeah.
And like you said, the additional pressure that creates for people and the accountability is maybe powerfully underestimated.
No, what I love that idea of putting it in the group, because I think one of the biggest challenges I have with the work I do is coaches just don't want to share their coaching. They don't want to show because they're almost. I think there's a fear of comparison. There's a fear of, oh, you might not think I'm any good. And I'm like, no, but like the only way we're going to get better is by sharing ideas. Like you mentioned now, like, okay, we'll do it 3 times. The third time you'll be so much better. But unless you actually have that accountability and, okay, this is what I've done, you're never going to improve. And I think that's always been one of the barriers of, again, we'll call it the traditional approach. Well, if everyone just does the same, it's safe because I'm doing what the court next to me doing. So you can't have a go at me because I'm just copying. I'm just copying what everyone else is doing. Whereas the approach that I think we've both gone under the last 4 years, because it's so much more messy and so more open, I think it's much more beneficial for players, but for coaches as well. Like I definitely feel like I've learned more in the past 4 years as a coach than I did in the previous 18, because I've been again comfortable to try new things and comfortable to fail and comfortable to have players and parents go mad at me because I'm not basket feeding 100 neutral forehands. And it's taken me a long time to get that level of comfortableness, if that's even a word. But wouldn't it be great if you're 17 and 18, young coach, and you just start your coaching journey doing that? Where you stick it in a group and everyone just helps you become a better coach. And then by the time you're as old as me at 41, it's just the norm and everyone's just sharing ideas. And I say it a lot online. There's not enough coaches working together in our industry. Everyone sort of works in isolation because they're either scared of sharing their best practice or they're scared of someone going, "Oh, have you tried doing it a little bit different?" Because again, I think it really hurts the ego. But I love that idea of the coaches putting it in the group, and that it's hard, isn't it? Right, to put yourself in front of your peers, and like it was interesting because I had a EQA, external qualification, no, external quality assurance visit for a coach head course the other week, and I loved it. And I loved it. And I said to the assessor, like, oh, this is amazing. And he went, what? So that's amazing. They go, that's not normally the response I get. So what do you mean? So well, normally I turn up and the tutor freezes and they get really scared. I'm like, why? Like, if I do something like great, you can give me praise. But if I do something that you can think I do better, then that's going to make me better. So and I loved it. And again, I just think there's a fear there of putting yourself out there, and I get it a little bit, but yeah, I definitely love the idea of putting it in the WhatsApp group. I've actually made a note. I think that's something that we could do more.
Yeah, I highly recommend. And it doesn't have to be through formal. I'm talking. The example I'm using there is a formal qualification, but you
Yeah,
could do that within. Anyone could do that within their own informal WhatsApp group chat with that's maybe
yeah,
them and their team of coaches at their club, or a group
yeah,
of people who all right, we're all mates, we're in a WhatsApp group, there's 5 of us, let's put something in and see if we can upskill and upgrade our practice, because why wouldn't you want to do that? If there's something, like you say, if there's something that you
yeah.
can do differently, do better, or even just by virtue of challenging yourself to do it and then do it again and improve it, why wouldn't you want to do that, right?
It's mad, and like I always say when I'm working with coaches, it's just my opinion. Like you either you either listen to it or you don't. If you don't listen to it, that's fine. Like I'm just sharing an opinion, and like I'm always conscious now as a mentor or a coach, educator, whatever. Like I don't want to judge someone as much. Like I'm going to share an opinion. I'm going to share like my lens, and if that resonates with you and it helps you change your behavior, then great. If you think it's a load of rubbish, then that's okay as well. And like I say at the start of every coach education course I do, I'm going to go through some concepts today. If it resonates with you, great. Take it away, make it even better. If it doesn't resonate with you or it doesn't work at your club, then that's okay as well. Like, I don't understand. Like, you mentioned at the very start of the call, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And like, some people listen to this call, like, CLA will not work for them. They may have that clientele where they just want to be told. That's fine as well. Like, it goes back to what I said before, it's just an opinion. I think people get really scared of opinions.
I do think on the one area, even if you're not a sort of disciple of an ecological dynamics approach or a constraints approach, there are a few concepts that I think are really powerful that cut across any way of doing it, really. And having like representative design and repetition without repetition. I think even
Yeah,
if the rest of the stuff, which is quite academic and hard to unpack, and I mean, part of
yeah,
maybe why it's not as widely adopted is because it's hard to. You have to sit there and read, articles from professors for a few hours, and then read it again and read it 3 more times, and before you soon can get your head
yeah,
around some of the language. It's maybe not that accessible, and I hope that things like this, what you do, Steve, is bridges a gap between the academic and the practical, and sort of demystifies some of that language and some of that yeah, sort of ivory tower academic stuff. It's not all that, but obviously there's a lot of challenging
yeah,
material out there. But those concepts alone, I think, are really powerful for the tennis coach.
yeah,
To be keeping in mind that you know is my environment representative of what the match court will look like, and if it's
hmm,
not, fine. It can be less representative or more representative. I'm not saying you have to play a match every single time you come on the lesson with me. It's not that, because there'll be times when we have to dial it back a bit, tone it down, and
yeah,
there'll be times when we have to ramp it up. But we know that the more representative it is, the more likely it is to transfer into the match court. So when we go back to our good example of, well, your forehand broke, it was lovely in the training, and then we went into the match and it broke down. Is there anything we can do with our environment to make it, more representative? Can we make it look and feel more like a match? Can we bring in more perception and action coupling? More decision making.
yeah.
Are there multiple solutions? Is it, things like that? Um, and that, I don't know how much people think about that, because I guess I still see a lot of 50 balls neutral from the basket, which is in the middle of the court. which
Yeah.
doesn't often happen in a match. And then to tie into that the concept of repetition without repetition, or variability, as it's sometimes called in other literatures. But again,
Mm-hmm.
there's this seems to be this misconception or misunderstanding that you know, okay, we know we need volume on a skill on something to do it well, to do it under pressure, but it's not
Yeah.
just the same, not repeating the same exact movement over and over again, e.g. 50 neutral forehands, finish over your shoulder, bend your knees.
Yeah.
It's not, it's almost like you need consistency through variability. You need to be stable across a range of either between skills or across skills, and be able to be stable in that situation, because that's what will happen in the match, isn't it? I serve and then I receive a forehand, or I
Yeah.
receive a fast ball coming into my forehand, then a slow one. I'm pushed back behind the baseline, I'm moving forwards inside the court. If I'm not stable changing between those things, I'm not going to be that effective playing in the match court. So I think even if
Yeah.
if you're not fully diving down the rabbit hole with the full CLA package, whatever world you come from, those two concepts alone are really valuable and can really add a lot to your coaching practice and upgrade what you're doing. That's what I've found anyway.
It's great. It's really interesting because like when I went down the rabbit hole, it is overwhelming. And I remember the first year or two, like there's so much going in. And what I tried to do at the start was combine the two worlds. So can I constrain something to get a better technical outcome? And I went down that route, very similar to what I sent you the other week, which we won't talk about. So I thought about that way. Okay, so can I constrain to constrain? 4 years down the line, I now know the most important part is representation. Okay, does it look and feel like a game? And the second part was repetition about repetition. So can I get the same outcome, but with multiple different ways, movements? And when I do a lot of my own coach ed now with my tennis coaching, all I talk about is stuff like that. Okay, well, can you create a more realistic environment? And can you get the same outcome, but in multiple different ways? And I think that's a better entry route of CLA than the heavy academic stuff. And I think once coaches start to learn how to set a better environment and they understand the concept of, yes, we need repetition, we need lots of volume of a skill, but that doesn't mean repetition of a technique. I think it'd be easier then going the opposite way and then go more into the language and being more played centered. And I think my journey, I went in back to front, but I think I needed that journey to get away from the traditional way of coaching. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
So I think for me, 18 years of coaching, it was hard for me to let go of my old way. And I did a little bit of, even like the under 8 book I wrote a couple of years ago, it's very much constrained to constrain in a lot of those activities. Whereas the one that I've just released recently, it's more open. That's took me 4 years of practice. It's took me 4 years of getting on court and trial and error. And I think that's the part, again, goes back to time. I don't think coaches are willing to put that time in because of peer pressure, head coaches. So it's something that I'm working with it on at the minute. Okay, well, could we almost have like a course that teaches you how to create an environment, gives you ideas of how you can get repetition without repetition, without basket drilling. And I think that's a great entry route for coaches rather than, okay, learn a framework and then change it a bit later on. Because I know with a lot of other sports and a few national governing bodies within our sport, at the entry level of coaching, they'll give you all the frameworks. At the highest level, they'll let you be a bit more played centered and ecological dynamics based. But then you've wasted 20 years then. You've wasted 20 years, a bit like what I did. I wasted 20 years. I think you've made a great point there. I think if coaches get two things right or better, environment setting, make it look and feel like tennis. Because at the end of the day, mate, that's what the kids want to play. They don't want to drill. And can you get the repetition without it being static and isolated. Um, but yeah, I think it's important. I think if we can look at those two things first, the other, the more deeper parts of the rabbit hole, you will get into naturally anyway, because then you start becoming a bit more intrigued of it.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I think I agree with that. I think you're right that going in that direction, you'll almost get a quick win with your coaching potentially, from understanding those
Yeah,
concepts, but also that might pique your curiosity to then dig deeper.
and it will, because you'll start seeing things work and then things not quite work and go, oh, how can I get that a little bit better? And I think that's the sort of point I'm sort of the point of my journey now that I'm in, because there's times when I do stuff and I go, oh, that's not very CLA, that's not very ecological dynamics. I'm like, but yeah, sometimes it doesn't have to be. It can still be a bit more linear and a bit more traditional. I think that's what I love about this approach. There's no right or wrong way. There's no framework. It's like what works in the moment, which I think is quite liberating, but also quite scary.
Yeah, it's non-linear, isn't it? It's not anti-linear, because there might be a time when everything goes according to the recipe or what the book says it should go,
Yeah,
and it goes A, then B, then C, then D. You know, doesn't happen very
yeah,
often in my experience, but it's not anti-linearity. It's non-linear. So that just means that it could or couldn't be right. Like,
yeah. It just sort of jumps around all over the place, and I'm just thinking now, like I put a clip up the other week of a player serving without a returner, and someone commented, "You said never to do that. You said it's wrong." No, but in that context, if I went the other end, it gave the player too many things to think about. So by me taking myself out, I've reduced the variability. Like again, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying never basket feed. Like there might be a time you have to basket feed, but I always want to try and get to that representative part. Like you mentioned there, dial it up, dial it back as much as I can. And I say now, as with my coaching, I'm much more like a DJ. I'm just constantly mixed in to get the right tune up the player, and it's I think it's more fun that way, because like I'll go to my lessons this evening. I've no idea what's going to happen, and at the start it was really scary because I had no safety net of a lesson plan. Because years ago I'd go, okay, we're doing short ball first drill. I'll progress it, short ball volley, then we'll do some condition points. Then I'll get my money and go home. Now I'll go, okay, well, let's explore a short ball. And it might go drastically wrong. That's good because not only is the player going to learn, but I'm going to get better as well. And I think just having that mindset of, can I set the environment, and then can I get the player to practice something where they get, again, the repetition without the repetitions. I think that's where I'm at the moment with my coaching, especially. It's more about the environment, and can I set the right environment with the player, whether that be the game, the task itself, the player, manipulate the environment. And that's what I like about this style of coaching. Like I can change it in so many different ways. And it's just, I think it's having the confidence to coach without the safety net, and sometimes fall and hurt yourself.
whilst your peers on the other court, either side of you, laugh and go, "Yeah, what's going on with this clown over here?"
Oh, it happens every day, mate. To be honest, it happens every day, and like it's interesting because like when I go places now and coach, I've had coaches come up to me and go, "Oh, what do you think of my coaching? Is it too technical?" I'm like, I don't care. I really don't care. Like how you coach is absolutely fine by me. I'm never going to look at you and go, "Oh my god, you're shocking." But also, don't look at my coaching like you just coach whatever the best way you can. And like I think with my coaching, it's just I'm comfortable coaching my way because of the experience and the research I've done. And you only know what you know, right? Like coaches on the side next to me are basket feeding. That's what they believe is best. And hopefully at some point they might watch a video and go, "Oh, I might try it a little bit different next time."
Well, it's a bit of a rate limiter, isn't it? If your solution to, because like you say, that you coach what you coach, and work with what's happening in front of you in this live situation where it's interactional and there's human beings involved. Well, if my
Yeah.
solution to everything is always technical modeling, isolated technical
Yeah.
modeling, I'm going to be a bit. I mean, sometimes that might be a good solution, but there'll be plenty of other times when that is not a very good solution because maybe it's mental, physical, tactical, whatever. It's receiving the ball, anticipating, it's decision making, whatever. But
Yeah.
if the only solution I have is always let's work on the technique of your projection skills, that's a bit of
Mm-hmm.
a limiting solution for the the sort of ocean of possibility that it could be, with the people in front of you.
Yeah. I always compare it to the pilot. So when things go wrong in the plane, you get the manual out, don't you? And you check through, okay, this is going wrong and there's a solution. We're not machines. Players aren't machines. And we've talked about a few times in this call, like the players probably got the solution themselves anyway. And I just wish like the young generation of coaches coming through now, we educate them in a way where just a bit more attuned of the environment they set. So again, going back to the play before about the dad. Well, if I get rid of the dad, I change the environment, I'll get a different impact from the player. But then from a coach's point of view, if I'm constantly telling you your backhand's rubbish, you're going to be missing loads of backhands because you're so anxious. So then, okay, we'll think about how I'm talking. Think about the activity or the game that I've set up. Is it too challenging? Well, if it's too challenging, how can I dial it down and make it a bit more attainable? And I think those coaching skills are much more important than what I now call the X's and O's, tactics and technique. And I think if like any young coach watching this call, just look at the environment you set. And if you set a learning environment that has uh, cooperation, co-design, you're working together with the player, they're going to get good at tennis because they're going to enjoy it. And you've created a learning environment. And I'm doing a lot of research at the minute on educational systems like schooling. And like, do they set the right environment for learning? Very, very sort of autocratic. You tell them what to do, you tell them where to go, and stuff like that. And again, you can see why tennis coaching copies education because we believe that's the best way to learn. But then if you look at the educational system and why that was set up originally, it was set up to get you to go and work in a factory and be told what to do and when to do it. And I think that's really interesting. So I'm massive into environment setting at the moment. So yeah, it's good.
And that must that environment thing. It's not just the boundary of the court, is it? Like I'm thinking about people I
Yeah,
really admire and respect and think they do a wonderful job. The Ian, the guy that I work with, my business partner, he's incredible at doing this. Right, I really admire him. It's setting that learning environment and challenge and working with the person and the performer and the player, but it's on and off the
yeah,
court. It's not just 4 till 5. See you next week for your lesson. It's away from that. It's giving. What about this? Can developing the person, organically. It's not like fake or rigid or something. He's amazing at it. It's giving
yeah,
people like, oh, have you thought about this? Or yeah, come back next week with one or two things on this. And it's not homework, but it's really it's developing the person, and then hey, guess what?
yeah.
Good people make good tennis players. So it's like everyone wins. I think there's an
It's
art to that
huge.
about the environment is not just the rectangle of the tennis court, but
Yeah,
it's everything else around it. Obviously, I mean, we could talk for 24 hours about the environment that parents contribute to, which is amazing
yeah,
and can also be double-edged sword and challenging for coaches and stuff. But they obviously contribute an environment. The coach does. What the player brings to it, what sort of day they've had will vary. What sort of day you've had, and all of those
yeah.
things. But setting those elite learning environments is really powerful stuff, not just as a tennis player, but for the person in life.
Yeah. It's massive, and environment, it's all around us. It's everything. Like the signs at the club, the posters. If your club's dirty, if your club has loads of rubbish lying around, that's environment, and that all has an effect on you as a person. And again, as coaches, and you made a great point about the rectangle of the court. We believe that the environment's just a court. It's not. It's the text messages. It's the phone calls. It's the website. It's everything. It's all encompassing of everything you believe in and your values and stuff like that as well. And I don't think we take that into consideration enough. And if you ever look at any successful club or centre, they've always got very good environments. They've always got good values, good vision, teamwork, stuff like that, good behaviours. And then you always look at chaotic environments and commercial providers. Like, there's a reason why they're not producing tennis players, because you look at the environment, you look at that. Okay, we're getting rid of 4 tennis courts, put a trampoline park in, and like you made a great comment before about Spartak in Russia, and that gets mentioned to me so many times. Yeah, but they do loads of basket drilling and drop feeding. Look how many matches they play. Look at how much tennis they play on top of the coaching. That's a great environment because you're getting the drilling, you're getting the basket feeding, but then you're getting everything else around it. And again, the Spanish is a classic one, isn't it? Yeah, but the Spanish do loads of drop feeding. Yeah, but they play loads of matches in the afternoon and they compete all the weekend. And they have a great culture of being nice and relaxed, and everything takes slow and everyone's quite chilled. And you go here in the UK and then you look at our culture, our environment. There's probably a few reasons why we're not producing as many tennis players. And for me, it's a great thing that I talk a lot about now is, okay, what is the environment? What is, I don't know, the tennis club you're at? Okay, why are you churning out so many good players? It's not down to the coaching, I don't think. No offense, but it's down to the environment that you're helping set. And Ian, he's setting that environment up. And I think that's where it gets a bit lost. And we talked a bit off camera about producing players. Again, coaches don't produce players, environments do. Ecosystems produce players. And again, it's something that we don't talk about a lot in Coach Ed, is it really? Like, how do we set the environment? How do we get the environment right? We always think about the X's and O's, the tactics and technique.
And who and also how often are other people thinking about that? I mean, do, it's our in a way it's our job to educate parents around that as well. Not in a sort of like patronizing didactic way, like but just like
Yeah.
this this is all part of the environment, not just the rectangle. So you know,
Yeah.
here's some good ways. Can they turn up 15 minutes early? Can they do a warm up off the court? Can they be prepared? And or are they sprinting in with their bag hanging off their shoulder 5 minutes late, sandwich hanging out their mouth, whatever, like,
Yeah.
flustered and all the rest of it. And, of course that will happen sometimes, but, we have a job to, to explore that and provide that awareness for other people as well, not just the tennis coaches, but for everyone, right? Like we have to take accountability for that and explore that with, parents, whoever, players.
And it gets lost, right, so much because we focus so much on the player, we forget everything else that's around them. We almost sometimes shy away from the whole ecosystem. Goes back to the play before with the dad. All I did with the dad was say, listen, when they're playing that far end, they feel a lot of pressure because you stood on the balcony with your arms folded, looking really grumpy, even though you're probably just tired and stressed out from work, and you're probably not even taking in the tennis. Like, just sit down, get your MacBook out, pretend you're working, and watch that way. Like, because your presence has an effect within the ecosystem. And he's like, oh, I never thought about that before. So again, just your facial expression, how you stand, arms folded, like it has a huge impact. And like as a coach 5-6 years ago, I wouldn't have noticed that. I would again mentioned this before, had a go at the player for not focusing, or hit the ball earlier, get the bracket back earlier. And I think that's one of the benefits of going down the rabbit hole is, again, I'm more aware or attuned to everything that's going in around me. And I always now say to the players, it's like the ocean now. Like we are little fish in the ocean, and we need to be aware of everything around us. We need to be aware of threats, safe spaces, and like we can't control a lot of the environment, but we need to be aware of it. And I think the more conversations we have with coaches on this and players and parents, I think the easier our job becomes because we all understand then it's not about the boundary of the court. It's about everything else that goes around it. And I think within a lot of my practice design now, I'm not designing games, I'm designing environments, and I'm thinking about all the different elements of, okay, how can I dial up or dial down DJ? How can I change that environment to get different effects on the players? And yeah, I think it's massive. Maybe we should do an online course, mate, on how to design the perfect environment. Maybe that's a good way in.
360 holistic environment, not just the rectangle.
It's oh yeah, there you go. I'm literally writing that down now. I'm sort of copywriting it. My tennis coaching 360, 360 environment. But it's so important, though, right? It's just, but it's something that we don't talk about and we don't think about. I don't believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there might be times when you don't even, meet the parents. Maybe there's a squad of squad of six new red players or something, and one or two parents you meet, but you've got an orange class afterwards, and you haven't got time to go out and have a connect with the
Yeah,
people for 15 minutes afterwards. You can't do that. You're at work, but it's quite important because they're the ones that see them for 23 hours a day. I see them. I might be lucky enough to see them for 1 hour a week.
yeah,
So it would be nice if they were it'd be nice to have a conversation or to be like, yeah, actually, this is what we do, and this is what we're working towards.
yeah,
This is our approach, not just transactional, like you said before. Not just
yeah,
cool. See you same time next week, and here's the invoice. It's, it's not why that's not why, and that's not why we really get into tennis, right? Like that's um, it's a, it's not. It can be a transactional vehicle, but it's much more. I imagine most people get into tennis because they've at some point in their life it's been a transformative vehicle for them, and so
yeah.
we then also as coaches have some sort of obligation, I think, to continue that to try and make it a transformative experience, not just a transactional one.
Massively. And I think as a coach, we have such power to manipulate that environment. Like I was just thinking as you're talking there, the amount of lessons that I think have been ruined in the car journey home. So I've done a really good session. You've jumped in the car with mum or dad, and they've just said the wrong thing, or they've given the wrong type of feedback, and then all the hard work we've put in has been ruined. I think that's on me because if I educate you, and part of the journey is educating the parents, because most of these parents have no tennis background. Very few come from a sporting background, so they're not used to sporting cultures or anything like that. They come from business culture, which is sometimes similar, but a lot of times different. And I think like it's something I'm working with quite a few coaches now on. Okay, well, how can we create the culture at under 10? That parent's number one. The players dead easy, right? But making sure the parent understands, like you said there, this is how we do it. This is our vision. This is our values. Do you share that vision and value? If you do, this is going to work. If you don't share those vision and values and you're just nodding, it's not going to work. At some point it's going to break down. And you made a great point there of we don't produce tennis players, produce people. Like we have such an influence over these young players' lives. Like most coaches you speak to or players, they always think about the coach they really enjoy working with who had a big impact. We were saying that before off camera. But that's our job. Our job is to make these better people. I know as a parent, if I went to your tennis academy and you said, we don't produce players here, we produce good people, I'd be like, oh, where do I sign up? And then I say to you, well, how do you do that? Well, we make sure that we have a vision, we set these values and stuff like that. We create the environment. I'm like, oh my God, take my money. Don't invoice me. Just take the money. Like I'll buy into that 100%. And I think that's where again we get it wrong a little bit as coaches. We just think about that 1 hour. And like you mentioned there, 1 hour out of a whole week, that's not a lot of impact. We're not going to change behavior. Parents are.
The values thing is massive, right? Like having understanding or having some sort of alignment on the values is, I mean, what a different journey that is, right? Like if I have my values and you have yours and they're completely in opposition or they're completely misaligned, it's like we're always going to be like at odds and pulling at tension. And when
Yeah.
our values don't have to be the same, we don't have to have the same beliefs or anything, but if there's general or broad alignment with the values, it's like the journey is so much smoother, right? Like everyone's going in the same direction and they're moving towards the sort of person they want to be, towards the sort of player they want to be, towards the sort of life they want to have, and there's those things. They're two completely different journeys, but if we haven't established that in the first instance or in the first place or at some stage, or recognize the importance of that, we might just be feeling burnt out, going like, why am I having these constant arguments, or why is this tension happening? I'm being constantly pulled away from the life that I think is important or the values that I hold, you know,
Yeah.
and they're probably feeling the same. Like, geez, this tennis coach is constantly pulling me away from the things that are important to me.
And it's not just players, coach, and the parent, it's the coaching team as well. So again, if you look again, I'm just thinking and reflecting as you were talking, the most negative, toxic environments I've worked in, I've been where every coach has got a different value, different vision, and we're all pulling off in different directions. Then you have the conflict and you have all the stuff that goes in around that. And I think look at the most successful clubs and centres, they're all pulling in the same direction. And that's what I love about Dan Keenan, because he talks about the bus, doesn't he? Driving the bus and passengers on the bus and stuff, but all going in the same way, in the same direction. And again, it's something that when I've been a head coach, I've always made sure that the coaches I bring in, they share those values and those visions. And the hard part is in the interview, you'll nod and go, yeah, I believe in that. In a few weeks, I think it's 3 weeks psychology to go back to your normal behavior, and then they'll go back and against those values. And at one club over 4 years, Matt, I got rid of 23 coaches in 4 years because they weren't pulling in the same direction. And like, I'm clever enough and old enough now and wise enough to go, well, it's not going to work. And I think that's what I like about the stuff that you're doing. And I do look at Peak quite a lot and the post you put on. You're all pulling in the same direction. You all have the same philosophy and same values. And it shows. And I think it's something, again, we're talking about environment here. It's not about the rectangle, the player, the parent, and the coach. It's the coaching team as well.
Yeah, yeah. I have nothing to add there, Steve. I think that's. I
Mate, I
agree.
think it's a good point to end on. I'm definitely took up far too much of your time. Hopefully you've had some dinner before you jumped on this call, because I know you come straight off
I've
court.
come off court, but I'll have some dinner after this. But now, honestly, I've really enjoyed chatting to you, Steve. And one of my tools for reflection is talking to other people, to other coaches, and listening to other
Yeah,
people's
yeah,
ideas and sharing and trying to hear and see what other people are doing, because it's quite an isolated world potentially that we work in, our little silos of I'm at this tennis club and you're
yeah,
there, and we might never cross paths, or we maybe see each other,
yeah,
once a year on a county forum or whatever it is, But
yeah.
so having these conversations and these discussions are a massive tool for me to help upgrade my own coaching practice. So yeah, really appreciate the invite.
Now, listen, I really appreciate you, because obviously you've been sending me stuff and we've been talking off and on for a while now. I'm the same as you. And there's a great quote on LinkedIn this week. I can't remember the guy's name from America, but he said, have more conversations, not presentations. And I thought, I love that, because it's like I've learned loads speaking to you today, and I've got a few more calls with different coaches from around the world today. Like, I learned so much. And like, it's not like me and you talking saying we are experts. You should listen to us. We know what we're talking about. It's a case of like sharing our journey and stuff like that. If people would like to get in touch with you, what's your socials?
So it's Peak Perform AU. AU is the Australia part. Or they can email us info@peakperform.com.au, or they can check us out on our website, which is peakperform.com.au as well.
Nice. And mate, I've got a great excuse now to get to Australia.
You're welcome
I can tell the
anytime.
missus,
You're
yeah,
welcome anytime.
mate.
We'd
Yeah,
love to host you
it's
over
definitely
here.
on the bucket list.
We'd
Pardon?
love to host you over here.
Oh mate, yeah, it's on the bucket list. Give my regards to Martin as well. I really like Martin Rocker,
Yes,
top guy.
amazing. Yeah,
And
absolute legend.
I definitely think we should have a freeway conversation with the three of us because I think he'll bring some amazing value to it. Because I'm a big fan of his. But listen, mate, I really appreciate your time. Go and get some food.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve.
See you, mate.